How's everyone doing? Welcome to Module 7, or Week 7 of the course. For this week, we're going to have Chapter 9 we're going to be reviewing. I'm going to go over that real quick. You're going to have quiz number 3 and assignment number 3. Make sure on your assignment that you're trying to really focus on the content of your work, as that'll be important, and showing your calculations. That's a key thing that I'm looking at. So for Chapter 9, we're going to be assessing studies based on multiple regression. This is really the real-life stuff that you'll be focused on. The preceding 5 chapters explained how to use multiple regression to analyze the relationship among variables in a data set. In this chapter, we're going to step back and ask, what makes a study that uses multiple regression reliable or unreliable? We're going to focus on statistical studies that have the objective of estimating the causal effect of a change in some independent variables, such as class size, on a dependent variable such as test scores. For such studies, when we use multiple regression, we provide a useful estimate of the causal effect, and just as importantly, when it will fail to do so. So, if you're trying to look at it, let me give you another example with housing prices. What determines a home price? That kind of thing. And what you're looking at is, what are the dependent variables that we have to focus on? To answer these questions, this chapter presents a framework for assessing statistical studies in general. Whether or not they use regression analysis, this framework relies on the concept of internal and external validity. A study is internally valid if its statistically inferences about causal effects are valid for the population. It's externally valid if its inferences can be generalized to other populations and settings. So when we go through this week, you're going to see a lot of focus on the actual development of the topics. Make sure to really focus on, how do we apply this? What is this trying to be applied? That's a key concept in this, and I think you'll have a great appreciation for what the multiple regression analysis is trying to reflect. Now, for the quiz that you have due this week, let me go over some of the questions that you might see. It's just 10 questions, as it always is, but let's go over some of the questions. You're going to be looking at a statistical analysis is internally valid if. So what is this internally valid statistical analysis? Another question is looking at a variable in the regression. What is that variable? If we include another variable, what will happen? Another question is going to be looking at the errors in variables bias. And how does that arrive when looking at independent variables? Next question is going to be looking at the misspecification of functional form of the regression function. So what do we look at when we omit variables? What does that mean? Next question is going to be looking at panel data estimation. And it can be used sometimes when looking at omitted variables. Next 2 questions are looking at sample selection bias. You'll notice with this example, when sample selection bias occurs, we're randomly picking the variables that we want and taking out to make it a better model, we think. Another question is going to be simultaneous causality. What does that look at with regard to the correlation between the regressor and the error term? And then what is the bias of that? That's another key focus. What is the bias looking at with the simultaneous causality? And the last thing is looking at an externally valid analysis. What is that evaluating? So make sure to note, you get 1 attempt at the quiz. It's 10 questions. So you got the assignment quiz this week, and I look forward to your effort.